General Motors recently announced that by 2035, it will not make internal combustion cars anymore. It'll all be electric. And so that set off a big discussion about when EVs will be competitive with internal combustion engine cars, at what point, how fast will they be adopted, and so on. So we're going to talk to Dr. James Frith, who is the head of BloombergNEF's energy storage division, and about the role that batteries and battery prices play in the adoption of electric vehicles. So welcome to the interview, James.
Hey, Markham, thanks for having me back, and always happy to be here talking about batteries.
As we are, as both of us are. So just to set the frame, the scene here, BloombergNEF's EV Outlook 2020 had these numbers for forecast sales. So by 2030, they would be 26 million, and these are global numbers, 26 million and 28% of global auto sales. By 2040, they would sell 54 million a year and be 58% of EV sales. So at that point, I mean, now we're at that point, they were on the S curve, and it's just a matter of until they become 80, 90, 100%, whatever that number is going to be. So the question is, EV battery prices affect price of the EV, the electric vehicle, the sticker price. What's the relationship there?
Yeah, so I mean, if we go back a couple of years, there was always this, I think, pushback against EVs. The battery costs more than the vehicle itself, or kind of half again, and that was certainly true of in the middle of the last decade. Batteries could account for kind of 50% of the total vehicle cost, or more sometimes. But as we discussed last time, battery prices have come down drastically over the last couple of years, and we're now at the point where the price of the battery as a percentage of the whole is kind of closer to around 30% of the total vehicle. And obviously there's some nuance in there, right? It depends on the vehicle segment that you're looking at, the size of the vehicle. Is it an SUV, or is it a kind of small Nissan Micra type of vehicle? And then as well as that, there's some nuances around the region that you're in and the cost of manufacturing the rest of the vehicle. But generally, the cost of the battery is low, and it's falling, and it's getting close to that point where we reach that kind of upfront sticker price parity, or the price where you can manufacture an electric vehicle for the same as an internal combustion engine vehicle.
Are we at the point very quickly where manufacturers will be able to make profit on cars? Because it wasn't that many years ago that automakers lost $9,000 to $12,000 per car EV that they manufactured. And that obviously can't go on forever. And the fact that GM is going all in on electric, as are other automakers, suggests that they think they can actually make a buck. And what role do battery prices play in that?
Yeah, so again, a really interesting question. And it's that, again, as we discussed before, it's that $100 per kilowatt hour mark, right, where it's considered the battery pack will be cheap enough for vehicle producers to produce electric vehicles for the same price as they can produce internal combustion engine vehicles. So at that point, if they're making a profit on their internal combustion engine vehicle, they could make a profit on their electric vehicle. And again, that $100 per kilowatt hour mark is expected to be reached around 2023, 2024. Beyond that, the trajectory of battery prices is one of, is a decreasing price curve. So we expect that batteries will get cheaper. And that means that, in theory, the automaker could either reduce the price of their EVs and kind of keep that same margin, or they could keep the kind of price of the EV at the same level as the internal combustion engine vehicle and increase their margin. And the path that automakers take will depend on the OEM that you're looking at, probably the market segment that you're looking at as well.
And we did an Energy Talks podcast not long ago on battery prices, on the forecast that you and your team did. And you pegged 2030, a battery pack would be about $58 a kilowatt hour, and it's $137 now. That's a tremendous decline. If you were going to take a guess, what would you think that battery pack is going to cost per kilowatt hour in 2040?
I mean that is a great question, and it's a really difficult one to answer, right? If I would go back 10 years, it seems impossible that battery packs could have cost $137 per kilowatt hour when they were over $1,000 per kilowatt hour. At the moment, we're saying in the next 10 years, they'll be about half of where they are today. So if I kind of take that forward, would expect that, by 2040, prices could be, half of that again. So you could be looking at kind of $30 to $40 per kilowatt hour. It's hard for me as a scientist and an analyst to say that's achievable when I can't see the exact route to getting there. But if we look at the historic numbers, that's what it kind of tells us.
Now let's talk about another important factor, which is rising energy density. And that has been going, that is the one thing, you cannot get more energy density out of a liter of gasoline. And you can't increase the efficiency of an internal combustion engine, which is really low, it's down around 20%. But you can get more energy density out of a battery, and that's been rising significantly. And what do you foresee for energy density, more energy, more electricity in a given volume of battery? Where do you see that going over the next 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, so that's another great question. And it really opens up two different paths for OEMs. You can, and having a higher energy density, so we expect energy density will increase. Today, the pack in a Tesla Model 3 is somewhere around kind of 160, 170 watt hours per kilogram. The expectation is that will kind of surpass around 250 watt hours per kilogram by 2030 on average, across the industry. So you have two choices then. If you have a higher energy density, that means that you can get the same number of kilowatt hours into your vehicle, but the battery pack itself is lighter. And that means that, if you have a lighter pack, your vehicle is more efficient, and you can travel further on that given charge. So you could go down the route where you say, okay, well, I'm going to sit the same number of kilowatt hours in there, and your EV will go further. Or in fact, actually, maybe you find that because the energy density is high, you can squeeze more kilowatt hours into that same space. And so you can travel even further. Maybe you can do 1,000, kilometers on a single charge. The other option is that you can say, actually, well, I only need an EV that's going to travel, 300, 400 kilometers for a given charge. And so because my efficiency is increasing, what I can do is make the number of kilowatt hours that I'm putting into that vehicle, I can reduce that. And what that means, fewer kilowatt hours, cheaper battery, and therefore the price of manufacturing that battery and maybe the sticker price is going to reduce as well. And I think the route that OEMs take, again, it's going to vary. It's going to depend on the market segment that you're selling that vehicle into, the market as well. Globally, in the US, there's going to be demand for longer range electric vehicles than countries like Europe, where the distance between cities is much lower. So I think there's going to be different paths taken in different markets, but it's going to be very interesting, exciting.
Here's another wrinkle on this, and that is charging speed, because we're seeing recent announcements about fast charging batteries, where you can get 80% of a charge into the battery in 10 or 15 minutes. And we're also hearing about the introduction of solid state batteries, which would reduce the risk of fire or explosion in the battery during fast charging. There are new battery chemistries that are coming forward. So it seems like by around 2030, 2040, we'll see some of these new battery technologies on the market. And that sounds almost like a game changer. We don't talk about it much.
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely is. I think, firstly, to this kind of second point there's so much kind of interest and development going into this. Just yesterday, BloombergNEF had a summit where one of the panelists said, there's never been more interest in battery research. So there's going to be breakthroughs. So there's a lot to come. In terms of the charging speed, again, I think charging infrastructure is pegged as one of the factors that could limit electric vehicle uptake. If you don't have a driveway where you can park your car and charge it, you rely on public charging infrastructure. If it's not there, maybe that's a barrier to EV adoption. If you can charge your vehicle as quickly as you can refill it with gas, then actually, that gets rid of that barrier. But the other kind of nuance there is back to what we were just talking about. actually, if you kind of if you can travel 1,000 kilometers on a single charge, you don't need to charge it as often. Therefore, you don't need as much infrastructure, and therefore that barrier was also removed. So I think we'll probably see, a similar kind of different push and pull factors that impact the vehicles that have fast charging versus vehicles that don't need it, because perhaps that comes at a premium.
Here's a question for you that I ran into a couple of years ago in the discussion around autonomous vehicles, and that is autonomous EV systems have to be redundant, and they're very battery dependent. They suck a lot of energy out of the battery. So the more energy dense batteries you have, then the better that is for the development and eventually the adoption of autonomous EVs. What are you hearing in your discussion with manufacturers and scientists about that issue?
Yeah, so again, that's a really kind of interesting question, and it's one that I think is still being played out. There's no definitive decision there. What it seems to be, and clearly increasing energy density, more power helps that case. But you also have the split there between onboard processing and cloud processing. It's if you have the onboard processing where you're really power hungry, and that's where the increased energy density and more power or more energy of the battery is a benefit. But perhaps the kind of alternatives to that is to have kind of cloud-based processing where you can do a lot of that kind of power intensive stuff outside of the vehicle and increase the range or increase the uptime of that autonomous vehicle, if you like.
James, thank you very much. Very insightful. Always appreciate talking to you.
Cheers. Thanks, Markham.